here's the thing, baby. If you were in the video shops, mom and pop, or Blockbuster, if you're a heathen in the 90s, you were bound to come across this cover. And you were bound to want to rent it because word on the street was this was a pretty fun little endeavor here, man. And it was true because this thing was not a success in the theaters. No, in fact, kind of stunk in the theaters. I mean, it made more money than its budget because it's micro budget, but you know, it wasn't nothing that was runaway. This thing here that we're talking about, Tales from the Hood, actually became a VHS and surprisingly a TV rerun, a cult hit.
So much so that people thought it was an HBO movie.
Yeah, really, a lot of people think that this is just a movie that was made by HBO.
Interestingly enough, like the DVD, the one you had HBO.
Had HBO releasing, it kind of made its name being shown on HBO 1,000 times back in the day. And that's where it gained the majority of its audience, and that's why it remains in the public consciousness. And it's very well regarded by just about everyone, which is more than we can say about its sequel.
Interestingly enough, HBO stands for huge butt order.
And you're the president?
Yeah. And king.
Because that's how it runs, right? Yeah. So we're talking about Tales from the Hood, man. This is not only a Hood classic, because we know those exist, but it is a legit horror classic. And this, very appropriately, the title harkens to Tales from the Crypt, which this is an homage to that style of morality tale with morbid inclinations and the twisted, kind of dark sense of humor, with a lot of, a lot to say about not only morality in general, but things in our society. Yeah. More so with this one.
In other words, Tales from the Crypt, only black.
Tales from the Crypts.
Crypt walking, Crypt creeper.
So yeah, man. And in the tradition of Tales from the Crypt, for those of you who don't know, by the way, Tales from the Crypt is not just a show on HBO. It's based on the 1950s era comics that actually were responsible for, a lot of crazy prudish people deciding that comics were the downfall of civilization, and it led to the creation of the Comics Code, which led to censorship of comics for fucking decades. So Tales from the Crypt, they were controversial in the sense that they were very violent. Kind of
especially for the 50s.
Especially for the 50s, they were kind of repulsively violent, but the irony of it all is that they were lessons about what not to do, about what kinds of people not to be. That was the irony of it, man. That these crazy ass right wing uber religious idiots got up in an uproar and condemned these comics. And at the end of the day, those comics were teaching lessons in a very extreme way, in the grim fairy tales kind of way, where they went to these extremes, these ludicrous, satirical almost extremes, to tell a story about what not to do and how to be good people. And that's why Tales from the Hood transcends its kind of low-budget cheesiness, because it does that. And it does that in spades. And all the more so prescient because it is in a way that America can understand, because America has a disgusting history with race issues. Just look around today and how bad it's gotten. We're always kind of stuck in this mire of racism in America. And Tales from the Hood use that as its vehicle to tell morality tales, not only to the audience this was made for, which is obviously an African-American audience, but to anybody else that might come across it. And on top of that, it kept the spirit of the comics by being morbidly gross at times and kind of darkly humorous at others. It was, in many ways, the Tales from the Crypt adaptation that people have been wanting, and yet it kind of went under the radar for a while before becoming that cult hit. So, you had seen this before, right? But it'd been quite a long while.
So I have to admit something.
Do tell. This already sounds juicy.
Back when we saw it back in the day, I thoroughly disliked it.
Whoa!
And I didn't want to admit it. Because I was like, damn, everybody loving this. You were like hardcore into it.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, this is stinky. I remember that when I was a feline.
A feline?
Bringing that one back. Remember that time that I said feline instead of fetus?
Yes.
That's and no one saw that one. That was first because this is another channel. Anyway, yeah, when I was a little feline, I remember hating it. And I think now, looking back on that, is because back in the day, the bar in my mind was so high for anthology movies because of Creepshow.
Right.
Now, anything that didn't meet that insanely high bar, I was instantly kind of like, man, that's stinky.
Yeah.
Including Creepshow 2 back in the day. I hated it.
I remember.
So, yeah. I think maybe that's what it was.
And now, what's your take on it now? Now that you've seen it for the first time in like decades, I guess, right?
Yeah, forever. I hardcore hate it. It's a piece of shit. No, it's actually really good, dude. Freaking enjoyed it thoroughly.
Yeah.
I was like, damn, homie. I'll go back and punch my
your kid self,
my feline self.
Yeah, man. And look, I'll even try to get on the level with you there. Back when I first saw it, I didn't like the last story. I'm not talking the wraparound last story. I didn't like the last story because I felt it violated that element of EC-ness. You know, it's the one that goes way left field, but it's making the biggest point possibly of the movie. So of course that changed once I got a brain and realized that there was bigger themes at play here on top of it just being a cool anthology. So yeah, I mean, I understand to a degree, but I'm glad that you like it now because this is definitely a movie that deserves a lot more attention, even though it's gotten attention as time passes. Like I said, it is a cult classic. I think it gets an unfair shake from people that might be at first introduced to it because it is a low budget production and it shows that a lot of times. They do unwisely at times use early mid-90s CGI a couple of times. It's literally just like maybe 4 or 5 times. And it's horrid. It's atrocious looking CGI. And yet somehow manages to look better than that Malabolgia sequence in Spawn.
There's literally a perfect comparison to that final sequence in Spawn. And
2 years before it, by the way.
Somehow looks better.
Yeah.
I mean, it still looks like complete and utter feces, but better.
The interesting part is that the people that did the physical effects for this are pretty well renowned in the industry. KMB Effects, Robert Kurtzman, Greg Nicotero, and Howard Berger. They were responsible for the effects here. Of course, there was a budget to take into consideration, but given the limitations, the effects, with the exception of the CGI ones, which they were not responsible for, what do you think, man? I think they're pretty damn cool, man. They're really in the spirit of the material being homaged here, is what I'll say.
Yeah, I think the effects are pretty cool. I think maybe if I had to like be a little weenie, which I am because I have one, a little one,
tiny, yeah,
it's really small,
super microscopic.
It's literally in me. I would say that I kind of wish and this is like a really crappy nitpick. I kind of wish the first zombie guy was a little cooler looking. But I get why they didn't go like super over the top with it.
Right.
But that's the only one that I would complain. Like I wish it would a little cooler, a little more groovy.
A little bit more goopy, a la Crypt.
Yeah.
I mean that's fair enough. I wish that, and KMB was not responsible for this. I wish the final effect for our horror host in his true form was a little bit cooler, but it's actually kind of cool.
That's not bad.
It's just it would have been cooler to see a little tweaked version of it. But maybe it's all the CGI surrounding him that really makes me go, damn it.
There's like a really bad like tongue effect.
Oh, the tongue effect is atrocious. A literal pink CGI tongue. But anyway, yeah, man. Other legends of horror are also involved in this. Christopher Young did the score for it. Of course, he's most famously known for composing the score to Hellraiser 1 and 2. So there's that to look up for. There's a segment in this that uses stop motion animation, which is incredibly fluid. Very good stop motion animation. And it's from the Kyoto brothers, which, have made their own name in the industry, in the horror industry. So there's a lot to dig into if you're a fan of horror, on top of this being an homage to that particular era of comic history in the horror vein. So another thing that might detract a large portion of the audience is that they look at this and they think, oh man, this is some crappy hood movie, because just go check out the channel Gully Boy and you'll see what I mean. There's a lot of hood movies that are marketed directly to
zombies,
what I guess industry would call the urban crowd, which, you know, kind of sounds bad if you think about it, like, you know what they mean by that, but they're really, really low budget, shoddy affairs. So this movie might get that stigma, but even though it is targeted at an African American crowd, it's actually, you know, the people that made this, Darren Scott and Rusty Cundiff, they know their shit. You know what I'm saying? They know the shit that they're steeping into. They know how to work those tropes that made Tales from the Crypt comics so good into the material of the world that they grew up in and are surrounded by, and that their fellow brethren are around. So they really meshes really well together. And what more could you ask for, man? So let's talk about this. There's a wraparound story featuring these three hoodlum types that show up at this mortuary, and they're coming to pick up the shit. Yeah. And by the shit, they mean drugs that some mortician found, and he's going to give them the drugs in return for some money. And, you know, they show up there with obvious ill intent to do something bad to this guy. And the mortician, as it were, is our horror host. And I gotta say, in the annals of horror hosts, Clarence Thomas III as the mortician has got to be, if he's not my favorite, he's got to be in my top two. You know, I'm not even going to say three. I'm going to say top two.
Damn, homie.
He's just so fucking good as Mr. Sims, the mortician. And he has this, like, energetic, like a vibrancy to his performance. It always feels like there's something teeming under the surface. Yeah. He even acts to a point where his fucking skin quivers at times, like he's holding something back, which is so apropos because at the end he is holding something back, and that's part of the.
That's bad CGI.
Yeah, it's part of the great ending to this wraparound story. I love Clarence Thomas III as Mr. Sims.
I gotta give some credit before I get to my thoughts on him to the major ode to the Tales from the Crypt movie. You know, it's basically that wraparound.
It is. And he's talking about the Amicus 1970s Tales from the Crypt movie.
Yeah, it is that. It's literally that wraparound. So that was kind of cool. Like literally that exact wraparound.
It really is. And that's one of those things that you know, like for example, Tarantino will make odes and homages to other movies. This is one of those things in this movie where you could tell that Scott and Cundiff really knew the material, and they pay homage to a lot of stuff like that. And if you're so familiar with these comics, Tales from the Crypt, Vault of Horror, and The Haunt of Fear, you'll see that stuff, and it'll really, really fucking tickle your pickle. Yeah. So yeah, I'm glad you caught that, man, because it is exactly that wraparound.
Yeah, and even the host is kind of like a mix of the Old Witch and the Vault Keeper. Just in the way he acts, you know. So that's cool. And yes, he's pretty awesome, pretty funny. Like, I was like, damn, this guy's hilarious. Unfortunately, I kept imagining Kenan Thompson playing him, and it was funny. I like the fact that he had a cane, but he never used it. Yeah. Like, he was just carrying the cane around.
There's just so many quirks to the way he portrays Mr. Sims. He's just a very likable character. He is humorous in the way he presents, and yet there's a sinister edge to him at all times. Just so good, man. So good that when they made a sequel to this, unfortunately, Clarence Thomas III passed away, and he couldn't be in the sequel as Mr. Sims.
And he could have, but it would have been a very different movie.
It would have been really morbid then. But they had to bring in another actor, and they found one of our favorite African-American actors, Keith David.
My boy.
The man with the voice and the plan. Keith David is fucking dope. Yeah. And that, when I heard that in the sequel he was replacing Clarence Thomas III, I was like, I'm on board. And don't get me wrong, one of the few good things in the sequel to this is Keith David as Mr. Sims, but he just can't touch the magic of Clarence Thomas III, and he's great.
Yeah.
You know, but Clarence Thomas III really fucking steals the show. And where would you put him in your? You know, there's many a horror host. Would he make your top 5? Would he make your top 10? Would he make your top 1 million? You racist.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think, and yeah, I think he would be top 5. Unfortunately, I think like in my top 3, there's literally a skeleton that says nothing.
The creep.
Yeah. So I don't know what that says about me.
Man,
but he's definitely top 5, possibly even top 3.
You know who's not in my top 100? John Carpenter in Body Bags as the horror host.
Oh man,
he was stinky. But anyway, Clarence Thomas III, awesome as a horror host. Anyway, he's this mortician who welcomes these hoods, and he's going to give them the shit that he found. But before he gives them the shit, he regales them with tales. And if you're especially astute, or really not especially, but if you're astute enough, you realize where this is going from the get-go, and that just gives you an extra jolt, because sometimes with Tales from the Crypt, the formula is the best part.
Yeah.
The fact that you know that evil is getting this just desserts, and it's going to be twisted. That's kind of part of the fun of the stories, you know, and this does that ever so well. So the first story we get is Rogue Cop Revelation, and it's about this rookie black cop that is on the force with a bunch of corrupt cops, white cops, that are taking advantage of their positions of power, and they use their authority to take out a social activist that happens to be black, and they besmirch his name and they make quick business of the guy. They kill him basically, and the young rookie black cop is haunted by the spirit of said being, who tells him to bring those cops to him, so that he can enact, his gory vengeance upon them. And it does. And when he does, it's a rollicking good time, I'd say. And on top of that, it doesn't end there. It doesn't just, and nowadays, if this movie got released nowadays, they'd be like, oh, they're just making excuses for a certain race, but not the other. They're not being considerate of the other, no matter the obvious racism. It's not saying all white cops are racist. It's making a point about corruption in the force. What we know is there. It's not an unavoidable thing. It's there, but it doesn't,
especially back then.
Yeah, especially back then with the LA riots and all that led to that and stuff. We know that corruption is there, but it's also making a point about the role of a responsible African American person, how you shouldn't just be complicit in a manner of, or complacent. It's about complicitness through complacency, not speaking up, not doing something because you feel afraid, and how that makes you as guilty as the people that do the thing. So not only do the cops get their comeuppance, but oddly enough, one would say, if you were like just thinking, oh yeah, hell yeah, them cops are going to get it. No, in fact, the rookie cop that didn't do much while the victim was alive also gets his comeuppance. So it's really, really solid in so many ways. It's almost like criticism proof in that sense. So anyway, what do you think of this story, man? Cool? Not cool?
I think it's pretty classic. Cryptian formula. Douchey ass cops they want to see killed. Rip off John Lithgow, rip off Cheech Marin, and rip off Willem Dafoe.
Literally look like rip off versions of them.
Yeah, they get murdered. This was the one where I kind of wish the ghoul looked a little ghoulier. But he was fine. It's just I like
I think it's because these cops so deserve to get killed.
Yeah.
That you want him to look all the more awesomely scary. Yeah. Just so he could really nail the overall cool factor.
Yeah.
But he disposes of them in pretty awesome ways.
Yeah. And the big climax at the end is pretty cool. And it has like one of those, I'm assuming that was CG. Or just, I don't know, it was like a weird effect of the dude getting turned into like a
oh yeah, the guy, the final cop is literally pinned to a mural with syringes, hypodermic needles, and then he's kind of like melted into the mural, And it's a really cool combination of physical effects with CGI, and this is one of the few times the CGI works in this movie.
Yeah, it's actually really cool looking. It's this just bizarre effect that looks cool.
Yeah. And the other effects are all physical, and there's stuff from heart ripping to head ripping, to this really awesome burn that looks really good. The doll is obviously burning, but it doesn't look like a doll. It looks like a body refusing to die and then falling over finally.
I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to be picky, but we've had a history with this thing and burning. Mm-hmm. I did see the stick, dude. I saw the stick.
Oh, the stick is there.
I didn't want to bring it up, but the stick was there.
The stick was there, but I think the overall effect works.
But the stick, dude.
Yeah,
the stick.
So look, these are not perfect effects. Don't get me wrong, but I think they achieve a lot with the restriction there. And I think overall, what's important is that the spirit of these comics is never betrayed. And the point is still made. Yeah. And in that respect, I think, despite the stick...
Yeah, the stick, dude.
All the effects pull off very well in this first installment. And it's a great installment.
Yeah.
It's a great installment.
It's like probably the most action-packed, too, so it makes sense to be the starter.
Yeah. Next up, we have what is probably my favorite of the installments. We'll talk about what your favorite is when we get... Or you just should point it out whenever we get to it. And it's called Boys Do Get Bruised. Boys, they get into little kerfuffles, they play hard, they skin their knees. So it's an old saying, boys will be boys do get bruised, whatever. But in this occasion, we're talking about a young African-American kid who shows up to class bearing what can only be the signs of some sort of abuse or domestic violence. And when confronted about it by his teachers, he basically tells them that a monster did it. And of course, they kind of blow this off as kid talk. Mm. But there's still something worrisome about the situation. Eventually, one of the teachers goes to his home to find out more, to dig a little more. And it turns out that the monster is just the way that this kid perceives, as Mr. Sims says, perception. The way he perceives the person that is hurting him, which is his stepfather. That stepped in, in the wake of the death of his own father, and he sees him as a monster. And this story reminds me a lot of a story that's actually in Tales from the Crypt. I forget the name of it. I actually have the comic. Should have dug it out, I guess. But when I told you about it, you're like, "Holy shit! It's just that only remixed."
That was like one of my favorite ones. I remember the payoff at the end, like in my mind. The second you said it, I was like, "Oh yeah, dude!" Yeah.
And it's such a good story there, and to see it kind of remixed here to the context of what it's saying was super, super cool, because the payoff here is pretty fucking awesome. Because the payoff ultimately is this. The kid, when trying to deal with his abuse, he is told by one of his fellow classmates that whenever she encounters something that, is untoward towards her, she'll draw it out and then tear it up or burn it to get rid of that from her life. Mm. And as it turns out, because these are morbid morality tales, that's exactly what happens. He keeps on drawing the monster in this naked, boot-wearing goblin kind of way.
He's got some snazzy-ass boots, dude.
Yeah, he draws his stepfather like a naked green goblin with boots. Yeah. Big-ass boots.
Cute little boots.
Yeah.
They're little but big at the same time.
Yeah, somehow. And when the stepfather gets mad that the teacher comes asking about, what's going on. And so, of course, he goes on the rampage, on the warpath, I should say, and starts to beat his mom and is about to beat the kid. But the kid creases the arm on the drawing, and boom, that arm goes crack, and then it's just one thing after the other. By the end, the father's a crumpled mess on the ground.
And it's really cool.
Yeah, and he's still an asshole, so that humorous aspect is still there. It's a really cool payoff to something that's saying a lot about, domestic violence, and that tendency for us to overlook it sometimes, or to ignore how the plight of victims usually involves covering for the person that's hurting them. But it does it in this really, really cool way. Interestingly enough, the person playing the abusive stepfather is David Alan Grier, who was at the time renowned for In Living Color.
So I want to give another little nod to this movie.
Okay.
In the history of taking weird... Well, I mean, I know back then he wasn't a comedic actor. The Creepshow famously had Leslie Nielsen as this, like, menacing-ass dude.
Right.
Who's known for comedy now, basically. Kind of like a weird parallel there.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I don't think that was intentional, but
it just so happened. Yeah. I do know this. David Alan Grier was advised not to do this movie because it would hurt his, burgeoning comedic career.
Yeah, he's like a dick in this.
Yeah, and he is a total dick, and apparently, it did kind of like make people react to him in a certain way for a while. But obviously, he went on to be as successful a comedian as anybody. But yeah, man, he does a really good job. I think he's probably like the best actor in the movie besides Clarence Thomas III.
Yeah, he probably is the most solid. There is like some, I think in this one there's a little bit of like some not so great acting if you want to be picky. Like the teacher guy, he's not great. That mom that was totally hitting on him.
Yeah.
Actually, she was fine. Actually, once the thing started going.
Oh, she was fine.
Yeah, they totally hit that, right?
Totally.
Not in the way David Alan Grier did, but
with that belt.
Yeah. But yeah, he's really good. He's really good as a bad guy.
And look, if the bad acting might be a reason for you. I'm not saying bad acting.
No, it's not awful.
The uneven acting might be a turnoff for some people. But in movies like this, it's kind of part of the charm, what I'm saying? It's kind of part of the shtick. So, but yeah, David Alan Grier does a really good job. So that's pretty cool, man. This is my favorite, possibly, of all the stories.
Yeah, I think so.
Yours too? Yeah. It's just maybe because it harkened back to that story, and it just has such a great payoff.
Yeah, the payoff, that effect, I was like, oh, shit.
It's a really good effect, man. Yeah, it really works very well. So, yeah, this story, pretty dope. The third story is called KKK Comeuppance, and it has what I guess would be the third best actor in this movie, and that's Corbin Burnson playing this. This kind of reminds me of like Strom Thurmond and all this stuff, like politicians that have a very fucked up racist past, but they try to hide that, and they kind of repolish their public image in an attempt to just keep on being politicians. Well, Corbin Burnson here is playing that type of politician, a guy that was clearly involved with the KKK, is clearly racist, but has hired what appears to be a interracial black guy to be his kind of PR guy, so that he can get the black vote, maybe, but more importantly, just stay where he is. But like many politicians of this ilk, he brazenly does shit that's obviously like, come on, dude. So in this case, he bought a plantation that, of course, historically was used for some fucked up slavery shit. In fact, this plantation has a history that involves the plantation owner refusing to release his slaves when they were emancipated, and instead chooses to kill the bulk of them. Later, the plantation is bought or taken over by a voodoo hag, old voodoo hag, who chooses to let the unrest, the restless spirits, I should say, of the slaves rest in tiny fetish dolls. In a lot of ways, this segment is kind of reminiscent of the Zuni fetish doll, and that idea of appropriation in that one. We'll hear, but here with this thematic instead. But yeah, man. So basically, because this guy's a gigantic prick and defies any sense of propriety, these dolls come back to enact the revenge of the slaves. Yeah. And,
straight up nibble him to death.
Yeah, a little carnivorous end for the guy. Pretty damn good payoff, too.
So, I want to start with a negative here.
All right, hit me with a negative. Negative.
I was about to say, homie.
Neg. Damn, homie.
This was you, dude. I didn't say it. Anyway. That freaking dude that was like his PR guy.
Yeah.
Hella stinky, dude.
Oh yeah, he's a bad actor.
He's the worst actor in this movie.
Yeah, super wooden.
Bad.
But again, doesn't hurt the narrative.
I was glad when he died like right away, because he sucked. He was a bad actor. Had to clarify why there.
Yes.
After your little kerfuffle there.
N-E-G. Negative.
Anyway, yeah, he sucked. I want to give a little bit of praise again, just because I read this recently or a couple months ago. But this kind of reminded me of a story in Alan Moore's Swamp Thing.
Okay.
Of like this plantation.
I mean, yeah, you told me about it.
Yeah, it's a really good storyline of a plantation with restless souls, and it's very different. Like, you know, it's like people are filming there, and the past is being retold basically by these people, so they're kind of living out what happened in the past. But it's all about these restless spirits and shit. Reminded me of that a lot, so that was cool. Yeah, it was a good one. It was a good one.
And again, Corbin Burnson plays such a despicable character. Yeah. And the fact that he plays them as kind of like nonchalantly charming, and by nonchalantly I mean he's nonchalant about his obvious racism. Yeah. You kind of hate yourself because, and even his assistant, the bad acting guy, is kind of like, I've been around you too much, because even though he's black, he's making kind of the remarks that the character's making. Yeah. And you kind of hate yourself because he does come off as charming, but he's such a scumbag that you know he's gonna get it. And when he gets it, yeah, it's a doll chomping good time. Yeah. Extra kudos for the stop motion animation here, as aforementioned. This is the one that has a stop motion for the dolls. And you know, stop motion is hard. Yeah, it's time consuming. And since they have to use green screen techniques, it's not always very convincing. This is a great example of some awesome stop motion animation with good green screen work. It looks really good. Yeah, it's really fluid.
It's surprisingly good because, like, earlier in the previous two, there's moments where, you know, when there's in the movie, in an older movie, when there's an effect, suddenly the screen is a little lighter and kind of fuzzy, you know? Right. Weirdly enough, that doesn't happen in this one. I mean, if it does, it only happens once or twice. But this is the one where you would expect that to happen, because there is, you know, like these green screen effects that are happening and you know, stop motion. But yeah, it's surprisingly solid considering there's so many effects in this one.
Yeah. The discrepancy in color between the actual effect and the green screen is very, very small. Yeah. And again, that's so fluid, the animation. Again, the animation was done by the Kyoto brothers themselves, making a name in the business because of their animation skills and their effect skills and all that stuff. So even though they were responsible for one of your least favorite movies, Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
Yeah, it's not good.
But
better than Chud, though.
True. But anyway.
Yeah, you admitted Chud sucks.
Well, no, I didn't say that. I just said it's better than Chud.
Well, that's a good point.
Anyway. Anyway, get off the Chud and Killer Clowns. Yeah, okay, so KKK Comeuppance, indeed, an apropos title for that. Our fourth and final tale, as far as, you know, within the narrative of the wraparound, is called Hardcore Convert. And it's about this thug living the thug life. You know, all about that gangster living. And, you know, he gets, because he is all into the gangster mentality, he doesn't think twice about pursuing a petty foe. Yeah. And chooses to confront said person. As a result, gets involved in a shootout and ends up being taken down by other rivals. And these rivals are you know, obscured when we see them, and it seems to be because he is in the throes of death that he can't really see their faces. And I thought that was really good, because as it turns out, these people are relevant to the story later. I think it comes off as very natural in the story. It literally comes off like he just can't see him because, one, the lighting, two,
dead.
He's dying. Yeah. Did you agree with that?
Yeah,
Yeah, I thought it came off really well.
Yeah.
It didn't come off as contrived and obviously this is going to be something.
It is one of those things where you're kind of like, if you think about it, you're like, obviously that's going to come into play, but but it's in the moment, it doesn't come off as corny or anything, and the effect is fine, you know.
Right. So this criminal is on the verge of death. We find out that he survived and he is incarcerated for life. and is going to die in prison. But he is approached by this woman looking like straight, what's her face? The poetess?
Oh, yeah.
What's her name?
I don't know.
Oh, damn. What's her name, man? How did I forget her name, man?
The one you hate?
Yeah.
Maya?
Maya Angelou. Yeah. And I hate her poetry.
Yeah.
I just hate poetry in general. But anyway. So Maya Angelou, the second here, approaches this cat and tells him, yo, man, I can give you the opportunity to be free on the streets, but you have to go through this rehabilitation program. He agrees because, fuck it, apparently. And he is immediately cast into this weird kind of science fiction-y realm, where like mad science, into another cell next to a hardcore racist asshole who tests his limits. And it turns out that that's all, part of the ploy to see where he stands and how he can shake off the behavior that he's used to going towards. So anyway, he's clockwork oranged into seeing what is easily...
in a hardcore thong.
Oh yeah, he's wearing a thong, and it's like super 90s thong, so there's like mega dong and all that stuff.
Yeah, homie was packing some meat though, I gotta say.
Yeah, straight up 12-inch or something. Garden hose, whatever.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah. So props on that.
Yeah.
But anyway, he's strapped to this gurney and just basically fed what is easily the most horrific part of this movie. Like literally, and it kind of like serves as a parallel to what we've seen so far, which is, though making a great point, it's doing it in a fun way. Morbidly fun, but fun. Here we're shown the problems with black on black violence in this case, with just how that goes into the problems of racism to begin with, how it's feeding the problem of racism because they're not seeing the issue with that. And the images being fed to them are interspliced with, cinematic black on black violence, but also the violence of old, lynchings and stuff like that. And it's pretty disturbing.
Yeah, it's kind of odd because to begin with, this one's like the goofiest one, just because of the freaking weird setup and
right,
and like the sets when they're bringing him into this facility are like hella corny looking, like super sci-fi corny looking. And then there's that scene where it just comes out of nowhere, like, damn, homie. Yeah. This got really serious all of a sudden.
Yeah, but it works wonders in terms of making you realize not only the seriousness of this segment, but the seriousness of everything that's been said so far. So it makes a very stark and clear point, like, yo, this is not just entertainment. There's something to be said here. Yeah. Take it seriously because these images are serious. And I got to give props to that. Had it not been done the right way, this could have been, even though it's made by black people, it could have been very exploitative and insulting, but it makes its fucking point really solidly. Just like, if you don't get it then fuck, what the hell, right?
Yeah. Does it have a killer ass beat?
It does, it does have that. There's some good beats in this in this soundtrack, I'll just say that. But anyway, this is probably my second favorite segment now. I wouldn't have said that back when I first saw it. As aforementioned, I was kind of like, what is this when I first saw it?
It's strange.
But it's my second favorite segment because it bleeds in and becomes part of the wraparound story.
It's interesting because, like, normally in anthology movies, unless they're Creepshow, you only have 3 stories. Mm-hmm. 5 sometimes. This one has 4. Mm-hmm. But this one, the last one, does kind of just become part of the wraparound. So do you even count it as a story? Like, it's part of the wraparound.
I definitely count it because it makes a completely different point. And anyway, it does bleed in that wraparound. We actually find out that this guy was just imagining all that stuff right before he died. And it turns out that the people that killed him were the guys that showed up at the mortuary at the beginning to get the shit. Yeah. And, they're very pissed that Mr. Sims has been teasing them this whole time because in their eyes...
At this point, homie's like trembling and lighting things with
Clarence Thomas is in full effect at this point. It's awesome. And yeah, they're very pissed at him because they feel that he's kind of been hanging the sword of Damocles, so to speak, above their head about the fact that he knows that they killed this guy. So they demand that he take him to the shit before they kill him. He takes him down to the basement where we begin to see snippets of what he might be. Like you say, he doesn't even touch light bulbs and they'll turn on. And he's quivering and sweating. And, he's just, he's so good. But anyway, they go down to the basement and, he takes him to where the shit is. And the shit is in, of course, some coffins. Where else would he hide the shit? Come on, man. It's the shit.
Yeah.
So they go to get the drugs and they open the coffins only to reveal that they themselves are in the coffins. And if this isn't a super cryptian ending, I don't know what the fuck is. And of course, at this point, Mr. Sims reveals that he is, in fact, the Lord that will command their eternity because he is the devil. And he turns, super CGI turns it into, a prosthetic devil. That, again, looks pretty good.
I gotta say,
but he's surrounded by horrible CGI effects.
Yeah, I gotta say, this was around the time that the morph effect craze was in full display. Morph effects were a thing that should have never happened.
Dude, they were everywhere.
Except for maybe when Mickey J did it. Hashtag didn't diddle. Even then.
What's it called? Black and white, right?
Yeah.
Morph effects.
Those were some really good morph effects.
Yeah, they're pretty good.
Damn, homie, how did you make that Asian lady into this massive black guy?
Yeah. I gotta agree, those were pretty good.
But anyway,
definitely better than any of the other morph effects we had at the time.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It's weird that though that effect is kind of not great in this, it's better than the ones in Mortal Kombat. Those awful morph effects. I've seen worse morph effects. Is what I'm trying to say here, and it does help that it turns into a prosthetic.
Yeah.
Demon guy.
The only problem with this is that once he, and it's a really cool ending. Don't get me wrong. And he's cackling maniacally as he lords over their damned souls. The background breaks away in this horrible TV CGI, glass effect. And, there's fire, but the fire's super crappy looking. The digital stuff here doesn't work. But the movie's so good and so in the spirit, in the vein of this cheesy morbidity that it's such a minor transgression. You really forgive it. At least I do. Because the point is made. It really does fulfill everything that the movie should fulfill. So I don't have complaints about it.
And also, several years before Spawn, somehow this shitty fire looks better than the one in Spawn.
Dude, the Spawn hell effects were shit. Hella crappy.
Yeah.
If you will. But these, although crappy, are actually in a good movie, so that makes a world of difference. And that's Tales from the Hood, man. 4 really great segments, 1 really great wraparound. It's hard to find an anthology that's thoroughly solid, especially nowadays. But here's one, man. Here's one that's earned its cult status, and I hope it only gets more fans as the years go by. There is a sequel to this. Perhaps we will see it. I've seen it and I was not very happy with it. It's not great, and it's the same creative team, which is unfortunate. But perhaps we'll see it. I don't know if you want to.
I'm a Keith fan, so
then perhaps we will.
Maybe.
Yeah. For sure, if we don't see it and review it here, then I will review it personally. But either way, this is one you shouldn't miss. Anyway. Let's give final thoughts and a final score relative to this type of film or anthologies and the sort. Give it to me.
As far as hood horror movies go, this is only, it's probably only beaten by Hood of Horror.
It's not! Hood of Horror is shit.
With Snoop Dogg, it was a classic.
Snoop Dogg and Jason Alexander doing a baffling... Wait, yeah, it's the one with Jason Alexander, right?
Yeah.
Doing a baffling British accent, I guess?
I think he was Australian?
I don't know, man, but it was bad. Hood of Horror is feces.
Yeah.
I know that they know that you were making a joke, but it's so bad that I have to... Clarify that it's bad, okay? Anyway.
That was bad.
Hood of Horror, do not watch. Yeah. Hashtag stinky.
Imagine you had bought this and inside it was Hood of Horror instead.
Oh, that would have been worst. Then it's revealed that I'm in hell and I have to watch Hood of Horror forever.
On repeat.
Oh, coincidentally, look at the tagline in the back. Welcome to the Hood of Horrors.
Oh shit, they knew. So yeah, I gotta say, despite being a hater of this film back in my youngin' days, pretty damn big fan. I'm not even gonna lie. Shockingly, I'm not even gonna lie. The second you put it in and the menu came up, I was like, oh, this turd. And then by the end, I was like, hell yeah, dude. Bump into that little song and shit.
See, this is why I am a advocate of revisiting things with new eyes.
See, you gotta revisit Batman '89. It tells you.
I will, man, and I will. I'm always open to revisiting things because I've discovered.
Because you're of a mind to make some mookie.
Dude, I'm of a mind to make some mookie. That's a line in that movie. Yeah, but I'm always open to see how I digest certain things later. A lot of people make up their minds about movies one time and they're done. And sometimes it's not that way, you know what I'm saying? And I'm glad that you like this, man. It's a great flick. What's your final rating?
I gotta say, I want to add a little more. I think this is like this is like almost a perfect. If it wasn't for that like really serious moment in the last one, this would be like a really good party movie, like for like Halloween.
Yeah, that's a good way to end the party, though.
Yeah, like, by the end you're like, damn, homie.
Damn, homie.
But you're bumping to that song though.
That's true. It's a good song.
And then at the end, it's pretty funny again because the guy.
That's true.
So it at least knows it can't leave you going, damn, homie. But yeah, like this is a really good like Halloween movie. You know, surprisingly, it was not made by HBO like everybody thinks. So yeah, it's a thing. Horrifying body order.
Score,
dude. I'm not even gonna lie. 10er. I'm gonna give it a 10er, dude.
Shit.
That guy alone deserves a 10.
Clarence Thomas III deserves a 5,000 for this. Anyway, damn, I'm shocked, dude.
Yeah.
I'm shocked that I'm in the Hood of Horror. No, Tales from the Hood is a classic that deserves its status. It's earned it, and it deserves much more than that. It is not only a great Hood movie, it's a great horror movie. It's a great anthology. And I think most importantly to someone like me, it's a great homage to Tales from the Crypt, to Haunt of Fear, and to the Vault of Horror that knows what's important about those comics. And then, even better than that, it injects the perspective of the African American experience into it to just really jazz up what those comics were all about, making a good point about the way we should be as people, or should not be as people at times. Great movie. It overcomes its shortcomings because it is so fucking good in every other way. And it knows what it's doing, and its makers knew what they were doing. And that's why it's good, man. So I'm going to just because say it's a 10, baby. Clarence Thomas, 10.
Yeah, he's 10.
But yeah, 10. It's awesome, man. Check out Tales from the Hood if you haven't seen it. Look, I'm going to tell you right now, if you've never seen this and you're like, damn, these guys are really blowing this movie, don't go in, expecting like insane great effects and then, this is going to... No, this is a flawed movie, but you got to see it the way... through the eyes of someone that loves horror.
Yeah, there's something...
there's something in this that's just great.
There's like a funness that is like rare
in
horror.
Exactly.
That being said, it's not as good as Hood of Horror.
Dude, you gotta stop. Hood of Horror is not great. Tales from the Hood is. Let us know what you think about this movie. If you've seen it before, if you haven't, check it out. Then let us know. We're interested. What up? Anyway, hit like, share, subscribe, because we're out.